Good morning, everyone. Pleasure is all mine. Thank you, Untral. Today, we will be covering groups, users, and user control training. Diving right in, we've gotten our introductions out of the way. Here is a brief overview of our agenda. I won't be spending much time on this. It's not going to be a long presentation, and I'm sure that at the end of it, you guys walk away with a pretty good understanding of how to cover or configure our subject material for today. Just some quick words on accessing support. You can access support at my.aleritas.com. Here we provide information on accessing product documentation, software downloads. You can access our knowledge base, create support tickets, and also check on the status of your support tickets. Alternatively, you can email us at support@aleritas.com or reach us via our support telephone number, including 24/7 critical support. Here is a brief view of what our client portal looks like. Again, we have numbers highlighting some of the items that I just mentioned before. To access our knowledge base and documentation, search engine where you can find information on just about anything related to the Aleritas and our products and manuals and anything of that sort. And of course, support. This is just another view of our portal that shows your download page and shows you how you can download your different types of licensed Aleritas software. Right, so getting into the meat of today's session, user accounts. Now there is a lot of text on my slides, but I'll do my best to guide you through without having to read through all of this word for word. So what are user accounts? User accounts are simply ways to identify individuals that have access to log into your server. It creates a bit of accountability, and it gives each user the ability to log in, see stuff that is unique to them, and be able to access it as per your organization's needs. Different users have different roles in our system. We have three basic ones that come as pre-configured on your system. We have users that are able only to activate presets. So think about your dispatchers or your emergency response teams, or anyone who you authorize to log into your server and activate your system. So if you'd like to limit users to just do presets only, we have roles. We have a preset role. Then we have a standard user. A standard user has some ability to change, perhaps change your message that is sent out to your end users. Or perhaps this person can edit different things like recipients and whatnot. We have a standard user, slightly more power than a preset only user, but not administrative. So they're not able to break your system. And last but not least, we have an admin account. As its name suggests, this account has full administrative control over the Aleritas system. They can make configuration changes, they can activate, they can do just about everything. Our default admin role cannot be edited, or rather our default roles are not able to be edited, but you can add your own, and I will take you through that today. Next, we have user account restrictions. So yes, you guys have users, preset onlys, and you have admins, but you can have any of these types of accounts and you have the ability to restrict them even further. So let's assume you have a multi-location type of organization, but you wouldn't want someone from location A accidentally sending off an activation to location B. By having user restrictions, it is a great way to ensure that location A users can only activate location A, and the location B users can only activate location B, and so on and so forth. Groups. What are groups? Groups are simply a logical way to group devices, people, or locations in our system. Now, there is no really hard way to do this. I tell all of my customers that the best way to set up groups is to really sit and think through your use of our system and who you'd like to target, on what devices you'd like to target, and that guides the creation of your groups. I've tried to make a bit of a differentiation in my little graphic where I have North Campus all computers, North Campus all devices, and all devices means all computers, all beacons, all horns, every method of activation possible. My third item on my list is an example of a group of people who share a role. So I've called them the emergency response team. And you can get as creative as you like. And last on my list, I have a test group. So if you like to perhaps set up a group of users specifically for testing, you can even do that. Group design methodology. I've sort of given you guys some information on this slide already with my previous words. Really think about, who am I targeting? What location are they in? In some organizations, we have the same functional group spread out across locations. So that is also something that you can give consideration to. Let's say, for example, you had multiple buildings on a campus, but your accounting department is spread across 2 buildings. You could create a group called accounts, target those people, and wherever those users are, they're going to get their activations. So grouping strategies, it's really flexible. If you have a device, one device could be a member of multiple groups. So functionality is, it's really flexible. And you guys, it just takes some work to think about this. This is one of our implementation startup tasks where we sit with you, understand your groupings, and this guides it guides the overall implementation. I always stress to get this right, because in an emergency scenario, once you activate, you really want to be sure that the right users get the right information on time. Here we have device assignment rules. Think of device assignment rules as an easy way to reduce administrative overhead. So for devices that are configured and check into the Alertus server, we can set up device assignment rules that look for various things. So let's say you're doing a very large rollout. And for site A, you've configured your devices. And for site B, you've also configured those devices. But manually adding 1,000 devices to site A and manually assigning 1,000 devices to site B could be a bit of a challenge. So this is why we have device assignment rules. In my example that I have up on my screen, we could group devices by perhaps their name, whatever you name them in our system. So we could say, if we look at example 1, I have a group called, if we look under name, North Campus, DAR meaning device assignment rule, all desktops. What this does is any desktop checking in with, and if you look under rule, checking in with a name beginning North Campus PC, automatically gets placed into my North Campus all computers group. And that is represented under target. And if I wanted to target all devices, then including desktops, any device that checks in with the name North Campus gets placed into this group. So these two are examples of how devices can be members of multiple groups, and I will elaborate on this a little bit more. In my third example, I have a device assignment rule called ERT, ERT being short for Emergency Response Team. Let's say your emergency response team, they're all grouped by your IT with a specific range of IP addresses. We can also look at your IP addresses and group devices according to IP. Now, this isn't by any means an extensive list of all of the ways that we can use device assignment rules. There are other variables that we can look at per device to group them, but these are some of the popular ways that we do perform device assignment rules. So whether they are desktop PCs or alert beacons or IP text-to-speech speakers, you have it, we can configure it. So now what I'll do, let me take you guys into the Alertus server and walk you through how to configure some of these topics that I have spoken of. Once you've logged in, you will be greeted with your Alertus console page. Now, to perform these tasks, it is required that you log in as an administrator. So perhaps whoever your administrator is, if it's a member of your emergency preparedness team or IT teams, they would need to have administrative control over your server in order to perform these changes. Let us start with creating a new user. Creating a new user is as simple as logging in, going to configure system, and scrolling down to users and access rights. Once here, you'll be greeted with a few options. First being adding a user. So adding a user is as simple as clicking on add user, naming your user. So in this case, let's call this user test user. And we're going to assign a role. From our 3 presets, if you would recall from my slides, we have admin, preset, and user. So I'm going to select admin. I'm going to provide an email address. For now, I'm going to leave user restriction blank, and we will get back to this. But for now, I'm simply going to provide an email address, provide a password, and I'm going to click on add user. And once I've done that, you would see that my test user has now been added to my system. Now let's move on to user roles. User roles is a nice way for us to look at our system. And let me take you back just briefly. Here we have our user roles, admin, preset, and preset only rather, and user only. You'd realize that these are the same 3 roles that I had my choice to select from when I created my user. In most cases, these are fine for most of our customers, but should you need to add one, this is where you can add a new role. So you can add a role and select from a range of options. If you'd like to have them select different alerts, what reports you'd like to have your users look at, and what devices you'd like to have your users look at, and if they can clear system errors or not. For now, I'm going to enable all. Let's see. Yeah, so I'll just enable all since this is an admin user that I'm setting up. But again, this is highly customizable. Test admin role. So once I've named it, I've selected what I'd like to have this user perform. As a matter of fact, let's limit this user. In this case, we don't want this user not being able to cancel alerts. So let's call this admin role. And let's save it. So now we have a new role. Now, if I were to go back to my test user and I'd like to assign this new role, this is where I'd do it. I'd edit my user, and under role, I now have admin role cannot cancel alerts, and I save my user. So creating a user, creating a role, and assigning that role to your user, it's super easy. Now we have user restrictions. Now, user restrictions are also really neat. It's somewhat similar to a role, but it's a bit more restrictive. In this case, let us say we're setting up a user restriction because I don't want someone from location A being able to activate location B. Let's call this user location A. So under groups, these are my different groups that we have created in our system. I'll also cover groups. I can simply say no restriction, or I could select, let's say, all computers. So I'm restricting this user to only access users and or objects that are in my all computers group. Next, since I'm doing all computers, I can say no restriction because we've already selected our our computers group. As far as my alert profiles, again, for now, I'm going to say no restriction. But what I'd pay specific attention to is my preset alerts. Now, preset alerts are predefined scenarios for your organization. So if you look at my preset alerts, I've got a bunch of them: all clear, animal and campus, desktop panic form pressed, evacuate all, intruder lockdown. You get the idea. In this case, I'd only like to have this user being able to activate an intruder lockdown or an evacuation. So I'm going to add user restriction. And for my test user, if I'd like to apply that restriction, I go to test user. I go to user restriction, which we did not touch before, and I'm going to say user location A. That's my role. So this user for location A can only target my desktops and can only activate for specific scenarios. Imagine that I had my scenarios already tailored just for this specific location. Next, I will take you guys to groups. So groups are logical ways that we can set up our system for different devices, users, or objects. Devices and objects being synonymous, actually. So how do we add a group? Adding a group is really simple. We click on Add Group. We name it. Let's call this location. Let's call this South Campus. South Campus. And I click on Add Group. That easy. Now, within this container, I can do anything. I can add any device that I want to. I can add devices, I can add users, and I can even make it a location. Now, for location, it's important to understand that this is best controlled by its name. Not necessarily adding longitude and latitude. So in this case, South Campus, and that is really descriptive of what location I'm about to activate. Now, for this group, I can also add by editing it or creating a new group. I can also integrate with Active Directory. So let's say your IT has grouping really well set up, or you'd like to set up user group targeting. We can interface with your Active Directory. This is my demo server, and we're all working from home, or at least most of us. So I don't have an Active Directory set up, but imagine that we did. We can connect to your LDAP server or your Active Directory server and leverage your organization's defined grouping. So if your IT or your organization has a grouping for accounts and another group of users for, let's say HR, for example, and so on and so forth, we can target these individual users and leverage them. We can also add mobile users to our groups simply by checking on this. We can name. I won't get into naming overrides, but just understand that we can also add our mobile users. Configuring mobile users is not within scope of this training exercise, but if it is configured, then adding your mobile users to this group or having this group available to your mobile users rather is simple as checking on this box. So I'm going to go ahead and save this group. And let's take a look at it, South Campus. And this icon simply tells us that we have mobile enabled. Without it, no mobile is enabled. So we've set up a user, we've added restrictions, we've added a role, and we've also covered how do you add a group. Now, how do we get devices into our groups? I'll show you two popular ways that we can achieve this. First is, let's take a look at a device, for example. I'm going to target my own machine that is currently checked in. We can, for each device, edit its properties, scroll down to groups, and I can simply check this box. Here's our South Campus group that we just added. So by checking this box and saving it, I have just also made my PC a member of our South Campus group. Now let me go back in there and show you guys something. This one device is a member of 4 groups. This could be scaled up to 20 groups. So each device can be a member of up to 20 groups. So I'm going to save this again. And let me highlight this really quickly again. Where you see system assigned, this tells us that our system has automatically assigned this device to a group. And this is controlled via our device assignment rules. For our 4th group, this has been manually assigned. So you observe that you're not seeing system assigned next to it. This is how you can tell if it's controlled by a device assignment rule or if it's a manual assignment. Good. So that's one way of assigning a device to a group. Now, again, let's go back to our scenario where you have hundreds or maybe even thousands of devices. This isn't really the easiest thing to do with such a large number of devices. So to reduce this administrative overhead, we've come up with device assignment rules. And I have some already pre-configured, and I'll take you guys through the logic of using device assignment rules to set up your different devices into different groups. So here is device assignment rule for all desktops. Let's edit this and I can take you through its logic. So we've named it. We've given it a description. Under assignment type, we're saying that we're assigning devices to groups. So we're going to have groups selected. What group do I want to assign to? Of all my list of groups that I have in my system, I'm going to say my all computers group. What field am I going to use to do my assignment? We select name. And here is a simple regular expression that says, if it begins with North Campus PC, then use it. So in other words, if it begins with North Campus PC, assign it to North Campus all computers. Simple, easy, we save it, and it's done. And I'll take you through how we can add another device using my all devices device assignment rule. So here we have our North Campus all devices. Now, let me show you a device, and I'm going to assign this so you can see how quickly and easy it is to get devices in. Let's take a look at my text-to-speech device. And for purposes of this exercise, I'm going to name this North Campus. Now, this isn't currently assigned to any group, as we can observe. But by changing its name to North Campus and saving it, let's go back in. This device is not live, so it won't check in, but if it were, it would have checked into North Campus all devices. I'm gonna leave that off, but that's pretty much how that would work. I can demonstrate it on my own PC. Well, my PC is already a part of it. And we can see this being demonstrated here by system assigned. It's already assigned. And that brings me to our third method, not our last, but our third popular method for assigning devices to groups. And this is simply by using its IP address. In this case, we're looking at a range of 192.168.0 to 225. I've described it, and I'm simply going to save this device assignment rule. And again, similar to all of the examples that we've seen so far, this is all we need to do. So now, for every device that checks in for your hundreds or perhaps thousands of devices, our system will simply evaluate them against these rules as soon as they log in, and they would be placed into their appropriate groups. It's important to understand that device assignment rules update. It is an update function. So you can create as many rules as you like, and it would move devices in and out of groups based on these rules. And this brings me to the end of my presentation. I will now field any questions that you guys may have.
Thanks, Nathan. So we have one question that's it. Can you explain the context tab? I don't know if you can go back and show him that.
Contacts. Right. So this is a new method of activation that we've built into our winter release, and you'd be speaking about this tab, contacts. So here is a fictitious user that I have. Some of you may know this name, but what this is contacts allows us to target an individual user across all of his devices. Now it is new, and we are still building or improving on this feature. But what it is, let me take you to contacts. Let's say you set up a contact. So here we have two contact methods so far. We can contact this user by his username or his computer name. I've simply added these two contact methods, given them some random attributes, and it would show up here. So for Mr. Ricky Bobby, we can contact him via his PC or his domain name. So we have this user set up. If we go back to our groups, here we have Mr. Ricky Bobby, and we can simply contact him from our list of contacts. So here's all of our contacts. To add him, we simply go to contacts in group and we save it. Easy. What I would recommend is for user groups, actually, in fact, I would create a group, and I'd think about this. I'd think perhaps of role. So I'd group my users by roles. So let's say I wanted to target my my response team. I can do that. I can go here and I can simply add Mr. Bobby to this group. And that is it. Which brings me to something interesting. How do I tell what devices or endpoints are assigned to a group? We can do that by clicking on View Devices Assigned to Groups. And this will display all of our groups. And by clicking on each, we can see device memberships. This currently is not showing our user, but he will be contacted, and we are continuing to improve on this bit of functionality. Here we have a tab showing our mobile users. They're probably all going to show me. All right, here we go. So here is my mobile device already checking in. Once we have mobile configuration set up, we have users register via the email address, so you can see which mobile users are part of your user group for targeting. Any other questions?
Yes. So we have this question, what is the difference between devices and computers? And I feel like you just kind of answered that question.
Yes, so devices and computers. In my example, I'm only showing a computer, but if we go to alert devices, here we can see an example of all devices, all device types that have checked into my demo server to date. So here we have two desktops, we can tell by their icons. And here we have two alert beacons. And here is a text-to-speech device, speaker device. And for each device type that I add, they'll get added to this. So in a case where we had our all devices group, I could configure different rules to place my devices into this group, my all devices group. Now, those devices would need to check into your server in order for this role rather to be triggered. So because I only have one device checking in at this point in time, we'll only see one active, but this is how that would work. So whenever this device checks back in, it's going to be placed into my North Campus all devices group according to my role, or rather rule.
Great.
Any other questions?
Yep. When creating a user, what are the password requirements? Length, complexity, etc.
So we do allow for simple passwords, and we do allow our users to enable strong passwords. So it all depends on your organization's password requirement lengths, but we can force our system to look at, or rather to only accept complex passwords. As far as requirement, as far as length goes, I believe it is 22 characters per password max.
Great, thanks. Next question is, how can I add all domain options? Or currently we need to do it manually, person by person?
Could you repeat that question?
Yeah, how can I add all domain options? Or currently, do we need to do it manually, person by person?
Domain options. Did I get that right?
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay, so by default, each server will support up to 5 domains. And to answer your question directly, no. Adding a user person by person is not necessary. We could simply target your LDAP server's grouping methodology for now. So let's assume, let's look here again. Let's edit this group. Let's go to advanced settings. And let's say you guys had your LDAP set up with user groups for your differing departments, or user groups set up for your different roles, for example. Or rather, we call them security groups on Active Directory. We can simply target them. So by pulling one group of users into this grouping, we can target if it's 10, 20, 5, whatever number of users you have in that group. Now for contacts, this feature still is being matured. So expect us to get a lot more robust with this functionality as we continue to build it out. I trust that was clear enough.
Yep. Thank you. Sorry. How can I remove mobile user from a group?
You'd reach out to us and we would make that removal for you. As you can see from our grouping, we don't yet have an interface for removing mobile users, but it is something that we are currently working on. And you should see it in a future release.
Great, thank you. So we'll take our last question. How can I temporarily suspend a user account?
Definitely, to suspend a user account, we go back into users and access rights. We edit our user. So where we have our test user, and we simply uncheck this box where it says enabled. We simply uncheck it, and this user is no longer able to log into our system. And you can tell it's disabled by this red X. They're not able to log in until this account has been enabled again.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Nathan. And thank you all for joining our program. Please fill out the survey on your way out to help us better serve you. I hope to see all of you in 2 weeks on March 3rd, where we will talk about how you can utilize your Alertus console for all events possible, emergency or otherwise. And if you have any comments or additional questions, please feel free to contact support or your respective account managers. You can also reach out to us marketing@alertus.com. And thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to hosting you again soon. Bye, Nathan. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.